When Donald Trump became president, he came into the presidency with a central promise. He promised that he would restore truth to the American government. He promised that the era of lies, of deception, of cover-ups was over. He said that Joe Biden's era was gone. There would be no Hunter Biden scandal. There would be no Afghanistan failure that the American people were lied about. There would be no COVID vaccine confusion. The era of lies was over. That was the promise that Donald Trump gave when he came to the White House. In this speech, by looking at one specific policy of the Trump administration, we'll be able to analyze whether or not the Trump administration is staying true to that principle. The question is, will RFK's move to end federal animal testing harm research? So, let's just establish the background real quick. And in this speech, we'll have 3 points, right? The first, we'll talk about the background to this question and understanding it. Second, we'll talk about the politicizing of medicine and show examples of where it has been politicized. And then finally, we'll talk about the solution to all these complicated issues. So first, the background. RFK, in this question, refers to Robert F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy is the head of the National Institute of Health, which manages a lot of federal policy in relation to health. RFK recently issued a statement out of the National Institute of Health saying that animal testing should be paused as soon as possible. He said that the agency's move would be to end animal testing drugs and other experimental medicines on animals. He did this with the explanation of animal rights, saying that he came into office as the director of the National Institute of Health. He came into office with a goal, one goal, to preserve life. And he said that his goal to preserve life extends not just to humans, but also to animals. So that's why he believes that pausing this testing on animals will in fact be a good policy. Politico on October 5, 2025 reported exactly this, that he is pausing testing on animals, or at least moving towards that if he can. To do that, Robert F. Kennedy has poured $87 million through the National Institute of Health into research. This research aims to discover alternatives to testing drugs and medicines on animals. One proposed solution is, instead of testing drugs on actual living animals like rats and apes, instead drugs would be tested on lab-grown tissues. This was one proposal that has come from the National Institute of Health as an alternative to testing animals. Politico also reported that 8 in 10 Americans want to end testing on animals. However, the opinions of Americans don't actually answer our question whether or not it will harm research. And Americans, being typically uneducated on issues such as these, likely do not understand the full implications of ending research on animals. They simply have good intentions in ending animal testing, but don't understand the costs that this may have. And this does have costs. As the Macomb Telegraph reported on January 4, 2026, National Institute of Health officials say that they are not ready to transition from primate research to research on humans or lab-grown tissues. They said although it may be possible in some circumstances, there are several other diseases or experimental medicines where doing so simply is not an option and could in fact harm research. They said that instead of on a blanket level asserting that this research should be stopped, they suggested that it be done on a more incremental basis. So, with this background, seeing that yes, in fact, it may harm research, I'd like to get to the second point of the speech. As we see in this prompt, medicine is seemingly being politicized. There are very few facts to back the move RFK is making, yet he's doing it for possibly political motivations. And this switch from objectively analyzing medicinal questions on the basis of truth to analyzing them on the basis of whether or not it plays politically well is becoming more and more common. We've seen this through issues such as gender transitioning studies and studies on abortion. For example, the Dutch Protocol was a protocol established in 2006 European Journal of Endocrinology study. That study found that puberty blockers are in fact have major benefits for teenagers. However, the study was extremely political. It left out several key data points that would have completely changed the study. One participant died from puberty blockers and was simply cut out of the study. Similarly, only 2/3 of the participants in the study had their results actually reported. Finally, the participant pool in the study were chosen as only extremely healthy and previously supported children in supportive environments, not mentally unhealthy children in unsupportive environments. So, as we can see there, the participant pool doesn't reflect what may be the actual participant pool of normal kids taking puberty blockers. This study came from Professor Michael Briggs, who analyzed the Dutch Protocol on gender transitions and puberty blockers. As we can see here, the point here isn't to talk about gender transitioning. The point here is that there's been a transition away from actual truth to warping studies to make them say what we want in order to achieve political ends. We've seen the same thing with abortion studies. The FDA approval for the abortion pill several decades ago came from 10 studies. These 10 studies studied 30,000 women. However, again, these studies selected women in extremely safe, medically supervised environments, which does not reflect the actual pool of women taking abortion pills. The Ethics and Public Policy Center published a major study on this in 2025, analyzing insurance claims from over 800,000 women. Their study showed that the abortion pill is in fact 20 times more dangerous than the FDA studies reported. This doesn't necessarily mean that the Ethics and Public Policy Center is 100% correct either, but what it does show is that the abortion pill is in fact far more dangerous than the FDA studies showed. So, as we can see from these studies on gender transitioning and on abortion pills, science has become politicized. RFK has politicized this issue on animal testing, trying to win over left-leaning, animal-loving voters instead of focusing on truth. And that brings me to our third point for this speech, the solution to all of this. How do we get out of this mess of politicizing medicine? The answer is complicated, but it's a simple word: truth. We must enforce truth. Truth comes before everything else. Because if we can't agree on truth, we will only be united in falsehood. And unity in falsehood is not something that we should desire. We should desire truth above all else. That's what built our medical institutions. That's what makes medicine work. If we can't agree on basic anatomy, truth, then we can't agree on solutions. If we can't agree on far more complicated issues, if we can't agree that there is objective truth to be pursued on them, apart from power battles, apart from rigged studies, then our medical research will suffer. So, that's the answer to the question. Will RFK's move to end federal animal testing harm research? The answer is this: he must focus on truth about this research first and foremost. That was the promise Trump made when he came into office, that the era of truth has come. So, if RFK intends to help research and save lives, then he must focus on one thing, and that is truth. Thank you.